Try right 46, left past 46 to 16, right to 4. Huh? Right to 46, left to 16, 4.
The night Rocky Dennis died, his mother was at a lawyer's office working on a drug charge. Many believed she was a mother who would do anything for her son, so the details of his final moment had to stay hidden. The movie Rocky Dennis' Life also showed one version of events where a second son was removed completely. So, what actually happened? And what did Rusty Tullis finally say before she died? Join us as we find out what Rock Dennis's mom said about Rocky Dennis, the woman the movie invented. October 14, 2008. Azusa, California, a 70-year-old woman on a three-wheeled motorcycle entered an intersection. The right tire separated from the wheel mid-turn. The bike lost traction, hit a curb, and she was thrown. Both legs fractured on impact. Weeks later, at a rehabilitation facility in Montebello where she was recovering, she developed an infection serious enough to require a hospital transfer. She was taken to Beverly Hospital and died there shortly after. Her niece, Helen Cunningham, put it plainly: she would never have stopped riding motorcycles unless something drastic happened. Her name was Florence Tullis. Most people knew her as Rusty. Cher had played her in a Hollywood film 23 years earlier, and most people who saw that film thought they understood her story. Florence Tullis was born in Brooklyn, the daughter of a truck driver, and she had a turbulent start by any measure. She was smoking marijuana and riding with bikers by the time she was 14, dropped out of school at 15, and took work as a dancer at Coney Island shortly after. At 17, she married a truck driver named Mason and had her first son, Joshua. By 19, she had joined a motorcycle stunt team called Speedy Babs and his Cyclettes and lost the position. When it came out, she was addicted to amphetamines. She kicked the addiction by joining a clean and sober biker gang. A second marriage followed, to a house painter named Roy Dennis, and they moved to Covina, California in 1959. Joshua remembered that period as something close to ordinary. Dinner on the table every night, Cub Scouts on weekends, a household that ran like a regular family home, even if it wasn't exactly conventional. Rusty had her own mother's family to push against. She described them as coming from a long line of hypochondriacs, and she had decided early in her life that if people could make themselves sick, they could also make themselves well. That idea became central to how she raised her children. The marriage to Roy Dennis fell apart in 1971, and after the divorce, the house changed noticeably. Rusty's biker network moved back in. Her upper-middle-class neighbors kept manicured ivy out front. Rusty had motorcycles parked across the entire front lawn. Her father called it Tobacco Road. On December 4, 1961, her second son was born. His name was Roy Lee Dennis, though everyone called him Rocky. He appeared completely healthy at birth. Blonde, normal-looking, no visible signs of anything unusual. It wasn't until he was around 2 years old, during a hospital visit for an ear infection, that an X-ray technician noticed something odd in the structure of his skull. That observation led to close to a year of multiple weekly appointments at UCLA Medical Center, and the diagnosis that came back was craniodiaphyseal dysplasia, a bone disorder so rare that fewer than 7 cases had ever been documented at that point. The condition caused bone tissue to build up abnormally inside the skull, gradually compressing the brain and creating internal pressure with no natural release. The calcium deposits were already pushing Rocky's eyes toward the outer edges of his face, stretching the structure of his nose and causing his skull to expand at twice the normal rate. Doctors told Rusty that based on the existing recorded cases, the progression was predictable. Rocky would go progressively deaf and blind, develop severe intellectual disability as the pressure on his brain increased, and die before his 7th birthday. Rusty heard all of it. She sat through every appointment and took in everything the doctors said. Then she went home, started looking into vitamins and alfalfa sprouts, and told the medical team her family didn't believe in being blind, deaf, or sick. She told Rocky the same thing from very early on. When he had a headache, she sent him to his room with instructions not to come out until he had made himself well. According to Rusty, he would come out a couple of hours later having done exactly that. He also used breathing exercises and biofeedback alongside those approaches to manage the pain. The doctors weren't moved by any of it. They had a diagnosis, a timeline, and nearly no surviving cases to suggest a different outcome was possible. What they didn't have was any reliable way of predicting what Rocky Dennis would actually do with the time he had. But what did Rocky's life actually look like growing up? And how did a boy doctors said would never read end up graduating junior high with honors? How Rocky Dennis lived. Getting Rocky into a mainstream school took a real fight. When Rusty tried to enroll him, administrators pushed back. Their stated concern was his learning ability, but Rusty believed the real issue was simpler. She thought they were more worried about how other parents would respond to a child who looked the way Rocky did. And she said as much publicly more than once. She pushed until they backed down, and Rocky enrolled in public school at 6 years old. He was behind his classmates at the start, which wasn't surprising, given everything else he was managing. But he caught up faster than anyone had expected, and by the time he graduated from Sandburg Junior High, he was an honors student. The same school system that had tried to redirect him into a special needs facility ended up handing him an honors certificate at graduation. His medical appointments continued throughout those years. By the time he was 7, Rocky had already been seen by 42 different eye specialists. His vision tested at 20/220/300, which put him in the legally blind range by any standard definition. At one of those appointments, the examining doctor told Rusty directly that her son's eyesight was too poor for him to ever learn to read or write. Rusty handed Rocky a book on the spot. He read it aloud from beginning to end in front of the doctor. When the doctor asked how he had managed it, Rocky said he didn't believe in being blind. That response was entirely consistent with how Rusty had raised him. She had taught both her sons that the mind had more influence over the body than most people gave it credit for, and Rocky had absorbed that completely. Away from medical appointments, Rocky had a full social life. At the Southern California summer camp for children with disabilities that he attended each year, he was voted best buddy, most good-natured, and friendliest camper. He was popular not because people felt sorry for him, but because he was genuinely funny and easy to be around. When kids on the playground made comments about his appearance, which happened regularly, Rusty told him to laugh along with them and carry himself like someone worth knowing. By most accounts, that approach worked. Every Halloween, he organized a group of neighborhood kids and led them trick-or-treating. His routine at each house was consistent. He wore a fake mask, removed it when the person at the door was watching, then grabbed at his own face and pretended he couldn't get that one off. He collected more candy than anyone in the group every year. When a plastic surgeon offered to operate and potentially correct some of the deformity, while also extending his life, Rocky turned it down. His reason was a single question. He wanted to know who he would see in the mirror afterward. He wasn't interested in finding out. His older brother Joshua, who had left home at 17, came back one afternoon to find Rocky at the end of the driveway, selling his own toys like a street vendor. Joshua had broken his toys. Rocky had decided to turn his into income instead. Joshua said it was one of his clearest memories of his brother, that Rocky was always thinking a step ahead. By September 1978, Rocky was 16 and his health had shifted noticeably. The headaches were severe enough that he was using a wheelchair for daily movement. On the evening of October 3rd, the family went out to dinner together, and everyone at the table could see how much weaker he had become. That night, he came to Rusty with a headache. and she told him, as she always had, to go to his room and make himself well. The next morning, she had somewhere else to be before she checked on him. What actually happened the morning Rocky died, and why wasn't his mother at home when it happened? The 4th of October. On the morning of October 4th, 1978, Rusty Tullis was at her lawyer's office in Covina. She had a drug possession charge pending against her, and that morning she had gone in to work on her defense. She had heard Rocky moving around the house at around 6 a.m. before she left. She didn't go to him. When she returned and checked on him at 10 a.m., he was gone. Her then-partner Bernie called her at the lawyer's office with the news. Rocky's face was peaceful when she found him. His official cause of death was recorded as sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, a condition of unknown origin that doctors believed may have been connected to his CDD. He was 16 years and 10 months old, and he had outlived every medical prediction made about him by nearly a decade. His body was donated to UCLA's Genetics Research Center, as he had agreed to beforehand, and he was later cremated. There was no burial and no grave. There are several details in the film that didn't match what actually happened, and Rusty confirmed this in interviews after the movie came out. The film shows her discovering Rocky's body in the morning, having kept watch through the night. That didn't happen. It also shows him being buried with baseball cards placed among the flowers on his grave, which was invented entirely since his body went to UCLA and there was no grave. Rusty also clarified that the film compressed events that had unfolded across 10 to 12 years into a single year, which changes how the relationship between her and Rocky reads on screen quite significantly. She wasn't bitter about the creative decisions. She acknowledged that screenwriter Anna Hamilton Phelan had encountered Rocky during a visit to UCLA's Center for Genetic Research and had approached the story with genuine investment. Cher played Rusty and won a Golden Globe for the performance. Critics had widely expected an Oscar nomination that didn't come, and Rusty mentioned that specifically in interviews, she was more bothered by it on Cher's behalf than her own. The film's reach extended beyond the original release in ways worth noting. Anna Hamilton Phelan later adapted the screenplay into a stage musical with music by Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil, which premiered at the Pasadena Playhouse in March 2008. A Swedish musician named Jens Lekman wrote a song called Rocky Dennis's Farewell Song to the Blind Girl and released a full EP in 2004 titled Rocky Dennis in Heaven. Radio DJS during that period repeatedly and incorrectly identified Lekman himself as Rocky Dennis. Rusty and Bernie eventually married. They separated 6 weeks after the wedding. Both of them were still deep in grief over Rocky when they made that decision, and neither recovered from his death quickly enough for the relationship to hold. Sam Elliott's character in the film, Gar, was based on Bernie. Rocky was gone. The film had been seen by millions, but there was a part of the story the movie had removed entirely. Rocky's story made it to screen, but what happened to his older brother Joshua, and why did the film leave him out completely? The son the film removed. Joshua Mason was Rocky's older half-brother, Rusty's son from her first marriage. He was tall, soft-spoken, and by the time he was an adult, he dressed like a college student. Sport shirts, sweaters, nothing that suggested he had grown up in a house his grandfather once called Tobacco Road. He was a writer. He had left home at 17 and built a life that looked nothing like his mother's. He left for a few reasons. There was ongoing conflict with his stepfather, Rocky's father, which made the house difficult to be in over time. The growing presence of Rusty's biker network also made him uncomfortable, and Joshua had always been wired a bit differently from the people around him. While the household had normalized drug use across the years, Joshua was, by his own account, more concerned about the family's refined sugar intake than their drug habits. He said it plainly and without apology. He was also gay, and he told Rusty while he was still a teenager. Her response wasn't immediately straightforward. She wanted him to be bisexual. She wanted grandchildren. At one point, she called him and suggested he visit a sperm bank. He declined clearly and didn't revisit the subject. After Rocky died in October 1978, Rusty struggled to find her footing. Joshua reached out and brought her to San Francisco, where he was living at the time. They didn't move in together. Joshua valued his privacy in a way Rusty genuinely couldn't understand, but he made sure she wasn't completely isolated. She eventually settled into an apartment in the Mission District with a group of biker housemates, and Joshua stayed nearby without closing the distance entirely. Then came his diagnosis: Kaposi's sarcoma, a skin cancer associated with AIDS. His doctors gave him a prognosis of 3 to 5 years, with the acknowledgement that some patients had survived longer. Joshua's response to the news was measured. He said the years he had spent watching Rocky had prepared him philosophically and emotionally for exactly this kind of situation. He believed recovery was possible. He said he didn't feel sick and didn't expect to get sick. Rusty spent the entire $15,000 she had earned from the Mask film on his care. The money went toward biofeedback sessions, daily vitamin C doses at 50 grams, a trip to a holistic medical center in New Mexico, and consistent encouragement to treat the illness as something that could be reversed. She sat with him when his partner and closest friend died of the same disease. Joshua died in 1987. He was 32 years old. After his death, Rusty was living in a trailer park outside Los Angeles and working as a psychic counselor. She had plans to write a book about her years volunteering with families of children with disabilities and with AIDS patients, and she intended to support herself through paid lectures alongside that. She had given her first paid lecture to students at a college in North Dakota and told people afterward she expected to get better at public speaking over time. She also said she was already pretty good. Her legal troubles continued in the years that followed. Multiple drug-related run-ins with law enforcement accumulated, and in April 2005 she completed a prison sentence for methamphetamine possession. After everything she had been through, what finally happened to Rusty Tullis, and what did she actually leave behind? What Rusty left behind? The version of Rusty Tullis that most people carry comes from the film. Cher, in a denim vest, red-haired, fighting for her kid against a system that kept trying to write him off. That version isn't entirely wrong, but it ends at Rocky's death, and the real story kept going for another 30 years after that. After Joshua died in 1987, Rusty was on her own in a way she hadn't been before. Both sons were gone. The money she had earned from the Mask film had gone entirely toward Joshua's care. She was working as a psychic counselor, living in a trailer park outside Los Angeles, and holding on to plans for a book and a lecture career that never fully came together. Her legal history didn't settle either. Drug-related run-ins with law enforcement continued across those years, and the 2005 methamphetamine conviction and prison sentence were the most recent in a history that stretched back decades. After her release, she moved into her sister Dorothy Stewart's home in Glendora, where she lived with Dorothy and her niece Helen Cunningham. She had been separated from Bernie for years by that point. She had no grave to visit for either of her sons. Rocky's remains had gone to UCLA's Genetics Research Center and been cremated. Joshua's death had been quieter, with no film or public record to mark it in the same way. She had spent everything she made from Mask trying to keep him alive. It hadn't been enough. Cunningham described her aunt as someone who had a very colorful life. She did a lot of things. She got in trouble. She did what she did. Looking back at everything, Rusty Tullis had spent the better part of 3 decades fighting for 2 sons who both died young. She had pushed Rocky through a school system that didn't want him, sat with Joshua through a disease that killed his closest friend before it killed him, spent every dollar the movie brought her on medical care that ultimately couldn't change the outcome, and then kept going after both of them were gone. Lectures, counseling work, an unfinished book, a prison sentence, and a motorcycle she wasn't willing to give up. After learning what really happened compared to the movie, do you think Mask helped people understand Rocky's story? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.